All right, guys, with the NFL trade deadline right around the corner, Tuesday, November 5th, a lot of people have also been asking, hey, what are the potential trade options for the Green Bay Packers? So in today's video, we're going to go over all the realistic trade options for the Green Bay Packers, two players that they potentially could shop at the trade deadline, among a bunch of other players that they could potentially bring in on this deadline. Now, let me start off by saying this, and it should be obvious. The Packers are not going to be trading for Myles Garrett or Max Crosby. I know a lot of people have been talking about that. A lot of people have been putting those players in their headlines because, people want to see that, right? It creates hype. The Packers are not trading for either of those players. Even if this wasn't the Green Bay Packers, if you look at Myles Garrett and you look at Max Crosby from a salary standpoint, the Cleveland Browns would incur $56 million in dead salary cap and lose $31 million off their salary cap the moment they trade him. It's not going to happen. And it's not that much better for Max Crosby. The Raiders would incur $39.8 million in dead salary cap and instantly lose $9.3 million off their current cap. Now, although if traded for, Myles Garrett's cap hit on the Green Bay Packers would be very, very cheap, it's not the same for Max Crosby. His cap hit on the Packers, if traded to us, would be $25 million. The Packers already have a $25 million cap hit for both Preston Smith and Rashawn Gary combined in 2024. So if they were to trade for Max Crosby and keep Preston Smith and Rashawn Gary, which is a whole nother story, they would have a cap hit of $50 million for 3 edge rushers. It's not happening. Then if you don't even factor that in and you just look at the history of trading for an edge rusher, and yeah, sure, it could be different right now, but Khalil Mack, when he was traded to the Chicago Bears, was coming off 3 straight 10-sack seasons, and the Bears had to give up 2 first-round picks, a third-round pick, and a 6th-round pick. Myles Garrett is coming off 3 straight 14-sack seasons. Max Crosby is coming off 2 straight 12.5-sack seasons. So you're willing to tell me that the Packers would not only give up multiple first rounds, probably a second, probably a third, probably another late round pick for a player that they then pay the same amount of money in cap hit as they're paying Rashawn Gary and Preston Smith? And that's even considering that the Raiders or the Browns would even trade either of those players. So I just wanted to get that off my chest at the beginning of the video because I keep seeing comments about it. I keep seeing it around, and that rumor fueled this a couple weeks ago that the Packers have called about Myles Garrett. Maybe they did, but the Browns are not trading Myles Garrett. And even if they are, it's not to the Green Bay Packers. All right, so now let's dive down into some realistic trade options for the Green Bay Packers. First, we'll go over 2 players that they potentially could trade away at the trade deadline. First of which is Preston Smith. Now, there was a rumor, I think it was about a week ago, that the Packers could potentially be shopping not only Preston Smith, but Andre Dillard. And when you take a look at Preston Smith's contract, I'll bring it up on the screen here. We see a cap hit of $14.1 million in 2024. Now, if they were to trade him, it says cut pre-June 1st, but if I were to move that to a trade pre-June 1st, it's the same thing essentially. But they'd have dead cap of $13.9 million. So pretty much that cap hit would remain on 2024. We just would trade Preston Smith away for whatever draft capital that entails. But we'd gain more money in the future years. So we see 2025 as cap hit jumps to 17, then 18, and then there's a void year on 2027. So when you take a look at the Packers roster, Preston Smith is the 5th highest in terms of cap hit and clearly the oldest at 32 years old. So if you were to trade him right now, you'll see our 2024 cap space $13.7 million. That actually jumps up $200,000. But with the big difference here is in 2025, if we trade Preston Smith right now, it jumps from $53 million all the way up to $70 million. So this is definitely plausible for the Green Bay Packers. This is someone that they've been given less and less snaps to. They're bringing on more of LVN at edge, even Carl Brooks at edge. And I think they do need to potentially move on from Preston Smith. A lot of people would agree, kind of taking a step down this year. Still good against the run, but not nearly as proficient at rushing the passer. Although the Packers are pretty high in pressure rate and rushing the quarterback, I believe they're middle of the pack in the NFL. I still think there's a different route they could go. And Preston Smith, already 32 years old, and his cap hit just continues to go up and up the next 2 years. So it makes sense if another team were to go and say offer a late round pick, mid to late round pick for Preston Smith. I'm sure the Packers would pull the trigger, but we'll have to see if that actually happens. Now, the next player is Andre Dillard. He's only signed to the Green Bay Packers for 1 year, a $1.1 million contract. contract this year. We've yet to see any of Andre Dillard, but that's also because Zach Tom and Rasheed Walker have remained healthy. But even when Zach Tom, a couple weeks ago, his shoe came off and he went out for one play, it was Kadeem Telfort that came in at right tackle. So if a team needs a tackle, which there are a lot of teams in the NFL, I'm sure a 6th or 7th round pick the Packers would gladly accept and ship Andre Dillard over to said team. All right, so now potential trade targets for the Green Bay Packers. And honestly, I'll tell you right now, all the players on this list are on defense. I don't really see the Packers going out and trading for someone on offense. I mean, when we look at our position grouping, wide receiver, there's really no need for the Packers to go trade for a wide receiver. If anything, they trade away one. Tight end, I think we're set. We're getting Luke Musgrave back in a couple weeks. Ben Sims has stepped up. Obviously, Tucker Kraft has been amazing this year. Offensive line, I think we have a lot of depth. Maybe they could go after a center to replace Josh Myers. I just don't see them doing that. Quarterback, we're obviously set, and running back, we are more than set with Marshawn Lloyd returning soon. We also, of course, have Josh Jacobs, Emmanuel Wilson, Chris Brooks. Chris Brooks really stepping up in the last game. So all these players that we're targeting, and you guys would probably agree as well, they're going to be on defense. And there's a few position groups that you might think of. You might think of edge and cornerback, and that's where all my players are in today's video. Packers maybe could trade for an inside linebacker like Demario Davis on the Saints, but I think they're actually more comfortable at linebacker than we like to believe. I think Edgerrin Cooper has been stepping up heavily, just won NFC Defensive Player of the Week right before I started recording this video. Eric Wilson's been stepping up. Isaiah McDuffie's been okay. Quay Walker, they like a lot. They give 100% of snap share to him, so I doubt they'll bring someone in to replace him per se. And if they bring someone else in, that just means less snaps to Edgerrin Cooper, which we know we don't want. So the first player on this list is Chase Young, edge, who's currently with the Saints. The Saints are on a downfall after week 1 and 2 with extremely impressive victories. They've been terrible ever since, and I think they could be sellers because they have a terrible cap situation. The Saints continue to put themselves in the hole in the cap situation, so I think they could be sellers here for this trade deadline. And Chase Young has actually been pretty damn solid through the first 8 weeks of the NFL season. We see he's played 375 snaps. Now, PFF grade is below average, but what I like to take a look at for edge players, at least more so, that means has more value to me, is the pressures and sacks. Chase Young has 30 pressures and 3 sacks, 8 quarterback hits, 19 quarterback hurries. He has 13 tackles with only 2 missed and 12 stops. Chase Young is signed 1 year for the New Orleans Saints in 2024. His cap hit this year is $3.4 million. Now, they did void 4 years to push out some of that bonus, that $9 million in bonus. So if the Packers were to trade for him, his cap hit would be pretty high this year, but they could also then again restructure and push it out similarly to this. So if the Packers trade away Preston Smith, look for them to go trade for another edge rusher, maybe to strengthen that group in terms of rushing the passer, and I think Chase Young is a viable option. Another viable option is Jadeveon Clowney, who's probably on like his 19th team at this point. Sometimes you kind of forget which team this guy is on. And he's on the Carolina Panthers, probably the worst team in the NFL. So I think if you give a call to the Carolina Panthers and try to trade for a 31-year-old edge rusher, I'm sure they'd be on board with doing so. And he doesn't have the greatest stats this season, but he's also on the Carolina Panthers. So take that as you will. 60.6 PFF grade, 16 total pressures, 1 sack, 1 hit, 14 hurries, 12 tackles, 3 missed, 11 stops. So Jadeveon Clowney, I think you could call up the Panthers, offer a late round pick, and I'm sure they would accept it because they're in a full rebuild mode. He's a 31-year-old edge defender, and they're giving him decent money over the next 2 seasons. Now, the Carolina Panthers would lose a little bit of money trading Jadeveon Clowney, but this is the Panthers we're talking about. I mean, they haven't really set themselves up too well, so I wouldn't be surprised if they would just went and traded older players such as this. They just traded Deontay Johnson for like a bag of peanuts to the Baltimore Ravens. So, again, you could call them, and I'm sure you could get Jadeveon Clowney for pretty cheap. His cap hit this year, $6 million. His cap hit next year, $14 million. These would both be lower on the Green Bay Packers. If you were to add Clowney to the Green Bay Packers via trade, his cap number this season would be $2 million and next season $10 million, both lower than what Preston Smith's are by a significant amount. Next on this list is Azeez OAli, and this is definitely one of my favorites on this entire list. And I don't know what it would take to call up the New York Giants, who were also on a downslide, and then it's a whole mess there with Danny Jones. I don't know what it would take because they drafted him in the second round of the 2021 draft, and recently he's been playing phenomenally, right? The last 3 games, you see 6 pressures, 2 sacks, 3 pressures, 1 sack, 4 pressures, 2 sacks against Pittsburgh. This guy's been on a tear. His total season stats, even though below average PFF, again, edge rushers, I like to look at pressures and sacks. That's, in the end, what matters in terms of getting after the quarterback. I know there's run defense as well, but 19 total pressures, 7 sacks, 12 quarterback hurries. He has 10 tackles. He does have 6 missed tackles, so a little bit of a missed tackle problem, but also 13 stops. Again, I think the Giants could be shopping players, just trying to get in more draft picks and then move around in the draft and maybe go get their future quarterback. If we were to trade for Azeez OAli, he's on the last year of his rookie deal, so his cap hit this year would only be $1.5 million when you take a look at his contract. He's on the last year of his rookie deal in 2024. So you would sign him so you trade for him and then likely give him an extension. And I only see the Packers trading for an edge rusher if they also trade away Preston Smith, because already there's a lot of players in that room with Gary, Preston Smith, and Egbare, Lucas Van Ness, even Brenton Cox Jr., Aaron Mosby. There's a lot of players in that room, and I don't see them adding yet another without getting rid of one, and that likely option would be trading Preston Smith. The next player on this list is Greg Newsome. Now, the Browns aren't doing too hot. They are coming off an impressive victory under Jameis Winston. Maybe he should have been starting at quarterback the entire season. I think Greg Newsome is a viable option over someone like Denzel Ward in terms of the salary cap. And when we saw that rumor a couple weeks ago that the Packers called about both Myles Garrett and Greg Newsome, I'm much more inclined to believe that there's an actual viable option with Greg Newsome. Now, he was their first-round draft pick in 2021. He's 24 years old, and he's had a bad season so far here in 2024, and that's why I think he could be sold. We see a 49.1 PFF grade, but more importantly, when you go to coverage, and we'll go to coverage here, he's allowed 24 receptions on 35 targets for 360 yards, 3 touchdowns, only 1 pass breakup, and has allowed a 130.7 pass rating. You might be going, why would we want to trade for this guy? Well, think about what the Packers' current defense is under Jeff Hafley. I think if you bring in someone like Greg Newsome, he could thrive in a Jeff Hafley system. He also offers you a ton of versatility. He's played basically even snaps in terms of outside corner and slot corner, 182 to 183. We know the Packers love to move their cornerbacks around. This would either allow them to keep Keyshawn Nixon outside and Greg Newsome down in the nickel, or vice versa. They'll have different options there. Now, Greg Newsome is on the last year of his rookie deal, but the Browns also accepted his 5th-year option. So his cap hit this year only $14 million, but $13.3 million next year. So that 5th-year option would transfer over to the Green Bay Packers, but they could strike a long-term extension with him. But this year's cap hit would only be $2.3 million. Now, what that trade would look like in terms of what the Packers would have to send, I'm sure it'd have to be at least a mid-round draft pick, say a 3rd round, 4th round, maybe even a 2nd, but I'm not really sure. I'm not making this video to discuss what the Packers would have to give up for said player, more so what players they could potentially go after. Next player on this list is someone that's also very intriguing for me at the cornerback position, and that is Marcus Jones of the New England Patriots. Another team that's not playing that great, did just beat the New York Jets, but I think you could call New England and try to buy some of their players. And one of my favorites here is Marcus Jones, 26-year-old cornerback, having a pretty solid season. You see a 65.3 PFF grade. When you go into coverage, he's allowed 25 receptions on 38 targets, 294 yards, 3 touchdowns and an interception, 2 pass breakups, has allowed 104.5 quarterback rating. Right around that 100 mark is usually where you see slot cornerbacks, but he also has versatility. He can play outside, 109 snaps outside, 165 in the slot. Jones has yet another year on his rookie contract. We see 2024 only $1.4 million, and 2025 $1.6 million. That's the only reason why I think maybe it might be a little harder for the Patriots to send away Marcus Jones, just because he has another cheap deal in 2025 on that rookie contract. But they are a kind of rebuilding team, so if you give them a call, maybe you can offer them something that they'd send over Marcus Jones. The final player on this list is definitely very intriguing, and that is DJ Reed, cornerback of the New York Jets. About to turn 28 years old. We see the dumpster fire that is the New York Jets right now as Packers fans just kind of watching from afar, just with a grin on our face, right? But DJ Reed has been excellent this year. He has an 80.4 PFF grade, and that's because these 2 weeks here in the middle, Denver and Minnesota, but also weeks 1 and 3. The past 2 weeks haven't been that great, but the New York Jets haven't been that great as of late. When you go look at his stats, 22 tackles, only 4 missed, so a good tackler. He's allowed 14 receptions on 28 targets, so only a 50% reception rate for 135 yards. He hasn't allowed a touchdown. He hasn't had an interception, but he's had 5 pass breakups and has only allowed a 63.8 passer rating. Now, when you take a look at DJ Reed's contract, he is on the last year of his deal, whereas cap hit this year is $15.6 million. They also have 3 void years. That's prorated into the 1 year at $4.6 million. If the Packers were to trade for him, his contract would be at $11 million for 2024. Then the Packers could potentially extend him after the season if they would like to. I like DJ Reed as a veteran add in the cornerback room. He only plays outside cornerback, 344 snaps. So if you think the Packers need to upgrade there with Jair on one side and say maybe someone like DJ Reed on the other, and they still can get Nixon in the slot, maybe Bullard in the slot some, this is probably your guy. In terms of a pure outside cornerback, I think either him or Greg Newsome would be the most realistic options for the Packers to go out and trade for said cornerback. So those are all my potential trade options for the Green Bay Packers. I'm just trying to look at it from a realistic front rather than just saying, oh, they need to go trade for this top player in the NFL. That's very unrealistic. We do this every single year, guys. We go through these unrealistic expectations of potential trades for the Green Bay Packers, and it never happens. Now, that doesn't mean the Packers can't be players during the trade deadline. We're just under 1 week away. The Packers are 6-2. They're clearly a championship contending type of team. They might want to buy in on that, get another player or two in this building to help their team a little bit, make it better on defense, and they very much could. And I think if they do, it could be someone off of this list rather than a Myles Garrett or Max Crosby. But let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Which player out of these would you be most happy with the Packers trading for, or is there another player that I didn't mention today that you have your eyes on for a potential trade target? But I appreciate you guys coming by to the video. I'll catch you on the next one, and as always, go Pack Go.